banks live with this legacy of 50, 60 years of archaic infrastructure. Some of it probably, maybe about 5 or 10% has been modernized through real time. Now, as what you said, real time is an expectation across a business, back office, front office. So now this other 90, 95% of infrastructure has to be modernized. Some of it is going to go into the cloud. Some of it, without wishing to get too technical, some of it will stay in place, but it needs to be modernized. That's one challenge.
In banking, every second matters. Fraud happens in milliseconds. Consumers demand instant answers, and AI can only deliver value if it's powered by live, real-time data. Yet many financial institutions are still relying on batch reports and outdated systems, making decisions based on yesterday's insights. The shift can't wait. Forrester predicts that by 2025, half of all businesses will use AI-powered self-service as their primary customer touchpoint. The future won't be positive or possible without real-time data at the core. Banks that leverage streaming data will transform customer experiences, manage risks more efficiently, and unlock the full potential of AI. Those who don't will certainly risk being left behind. Today, I'm joined by Guillaume Aimé, CEO of Lenses.io and a leading voice on data innovation. Together, we'll explore why real-time data is becoming the lifeblood of modern banking, the hurdles institutions must overcome, and how to build the foundation for AI-driven success. So, welcome to the show, Guillaume. Before we begin, could you please introduce yourself and your company to our audience?
Yeah, hi Jim, it's an absolute honor. Big fan of the show. Great to be here. So I'm Guillaume, I'm CEO of Lenses.io, as you mentioned. We are one of the leading players in what we call a data operating fabric. We make it easy for businesses to harness the power of real-time data and transform their business so that their customers can have services that provide real-time insights and actions.
So let's start with the most foundational level. Why do bank executives care about whether or not processing happens in real time?
Okay. Well, I mean, maybe we should clarify for your listeners what we mean by real time. Data is generated by every single organization, especially within financial services, constantly. And the moment or time at which you can act on that data is a competitive advantage for any business. And we have to say that financial services has actually done a pretty good job over the last 20, 30 years. Imagine going up to an ATM machine and pushing in your card and typing in your PIN number and having to wait 5 minutes for you to be authenticated to withdraw your cash. I mean, that just wouldn't be acceptable. So, and I think because of the intricate nature of financial services within a world economy, there's been a lot of pressure on banks to ensure that some services run in real time. But now we're really crossing a chasm. It's a new era now where real-time data is both a huge opportunity, but also a huge threat, either if you don't do it and you don't harness real-time data, or if you get it wrong. So if we think over the last 20 years, high-frequency trading systems, settlement systems, real-time payment, authentication. These are all kind of services that banks and financial services organizations have harnessed. You could say that after the financial crash, there was kind of increased pressure on cyber resilience.
Yep.
Regulators were demanding for real-time insights on the position of banks. So that kind of triggered a new wave of systems being modernized to real time. Open banking really was a great driver of real time as well, forcing some of the legacy players to open up their platforms, share data to third parties, and that also caused that information to be shared in real time. Real time insurance settlement, real time quotes. Imagine if you're on a insurance aggregator site and your company took 5 minutes to respond to a quote. You just wouldn't be in the game, right? And you'd lose market share.
You know,
Now,
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah. Well, I was going to say we're really turning a page because now these are some of the services that you kind of might expect. But now customers, it's an absolute requirement by customers to have real-time services. A bank can have the best possible branches. Those branches could be palatial, but actually, if the mobile application doesn't show your bank account in real time, that just wouldn't be acceptable, especially to a new generation.
You know,
And now with the AI, yeah, go ahead, Jim.
it's just interesting because, to your point, consumers know what they get anyway. They don't understand the back office of a financial institution. More and more, they don't at all understand if something's not real time. They kind of in the back of their mind thought, I understand I may not get credit for my paycheck right away, but the rest of everything else is done in real time. And it's not.
It's
It's interesting because you've written in Forbes, because you're a regular contributor, about companies struggling with poor or inaccessible data when implementing AI. I think, could you give any more explanations or illustrations as to what this looks like in a typical retail bank and why it impacts the customer experience so dramatically?
yeah. So you're totally right. As a consumer, I just expect it to be real time. And the fact it's difficult behind the scenes is not my problem as a consumer, right? We just have that level of expectation now. I think we'll probably get into why some of the challenges to the banks of all these systems not being in real time. But when it comes to AI, again, this is where expectations are very high from consumers. We're now becoming very familiar with the likes of ChatGPT and AI agents and so on. Let me give you an example. What we're starting to see more and more from our customers is um, AI assisted call centers. You call your bank through the call center and you might be on hold for 30 minutes if it's human. There's a huge opportunity for that frontline support to actually be AI. But for us to replace that call center operator with an AI operator, then the AI system is really going to need a lot of context. It's going to need context and the context in real time. So that's a lot of feeds there. That system has to be built and it has to be trusted. And this is some of the complexities and the problems for banks is have they put in place the right infrastructure and the right practices to build these systems that can be trusted and put in front of customers. Um, Imagine if you were engaging that call center operator and it just stopped for 5 minutes to think whilst it fetched some data in a batch. Well, maybe if I was talking to a human, I would accept that. But if I'm talking to a machine, I'm not going to accept that it freezes for 5 minutes whilst it goes and fetches a batch of data. Or worse still, it doesn't have the latest information about me.
Yeah, it's interesting because you think about this, a lot of this, where banks are really focusing a lot of their AI implementation right now is on the back office to try to get more efficiency, more automation, more effectiveness. But even that can't be done if you're not running in real time. You just brought up a great example in a call center where we're trying to lower the cost of a call center for the basic requests. But basic requests are things such as my current balance, what transactions have happened in the last day or in the last minute if they're looking at fraud. In addition, a lot of organizations are spending a lot of money and a lot of time on improving the security side and the fraud side and the privacy side of what's going on within their financial institutions. The current legacy systems just can't support what we can do and what we must do, not only for our organization, but for our customers as well. Correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think for a bank or any business to really successfully position itself for this AI revolution, an AI era, there's a lot of work that needs to be happen behind the scenes. Fundamentally, a lot of the core infrastructure needs to be modernized. These are IT
Right.
systems. The banks live with this legacy of 50, 60 years of archaic infrastructure. Some of it probably maybe about 5 or 10% has been modernized through real time. Now, as what you said, real time is an expectation across a business, back office, front office. So now this other 90, 95% of infrastructure has to be modernized. Some of it is going to go into the cloud. Some of it, uh, without wishing to get too technical, some of it will stay in place, but it needs to be modernized. That's one challenge. The second challenge is kind of upskilling your team for these systems to be built to process real-time data. It's a whole new paradigm actually from how systems were operated and built in the past.
Right.
So you've got a workforce that somehow you need to upskill to this new form of data. And this is really where Lenses comes in, by the way, is simplifying the experience for those teams so that actually you don't have to upskill. You can keep the skills that you have already in the house and just make the work simpler through great tooling. And I was going to say that the other thing is time is not so much of the essence in some regards. I think you touched on it, but there are a few use cases now that are just a simple threat, not only to the business, but in some cases to the flow of money in the economy. I mean,
Right.
cyber security. You now have seconds to respond and protect against a threat or defend against a threat. Fraud could be millions of lost funds if you're not responding quickly to fraud. Also can lead to money laundering and all sorts of other challenges. So I think some businesses really, in some cases, need to wake up and realize the threat of not protecting their business, let alone having the competitive advantage by not modernizing these systems and applications to real time.
It's interesting, Guillaume. You have to work with organizations all the time that need their core updated. Most organizations, it's bigger than a bread box. It is such a huge endeavor. So they're trying to find ways to compartmentalize what's going on. How does Lenses work with a firm that may have a partial legacy, a partial modern system? How do you work alongside a core to make it so that they can get the benefits of what Lenses provides without having to wait until the whole thing is being redone?
Yeah, that's the key, right? I think we have to accept that these businesses are not going to be able to update or modernize all their systems or even be able to move their data. So the great thing about Lenses is it sits on top of an organization or a bank's existing investment. It's not asking to change anything. It's going to discover what real-time data is already exists in the business. That's already a great help. Jim, if I asked you to make a quiche, you wouldn't be able to make a quiche without knowing what ingredients you have. And, I don't know about your taste, but you probably want to taste the ingredients before you make the quiche. So in the case of uh, building a new system that responds to real time, those teams that are building those systems need to know what data already exists, what ingredients already exist. Not only do they need to do that, they need to be able to taste it. And by taste it, I mean just see the data quality. Do I trust it? Is this data good enough to build my service or application? Now, you can do that without modernizing anything, without moving the data. That's the thing that Leslie started. It just sits on top and it discovers and it empowers teams to be able to touch and feel and taste data, if I continue with the analogy. Then the next step is, okay, I've got the data to build my system. I like it. It's clean. Or maybe I need to process it in some way. Now I need to build my application. And again, this is kind of the work done by engineering teams. But when you're building these applications with real-time data, it's a very, very complex. Some of these systems are like super jets and F1 cars, really complex. You need some of your best engineers. And unfortunately, you don't have an army of best engineers. When you've got 5,000 systems to modernize, you're going to have to use your entire workforce. So either you upskill them or you make their job easier. And this, again, is where Lenses comes in. It makes the work of building these systems so much easier so that practically anyone, almost someone without an engineering pedigree, can do it.
That is so important, and we're lucky in the banking industry. Over the last 5-6 years, we've gotten more and better solution providers that can help and partner and make it so that, so many financial institutions would say, I'd like to do a core conversion, but I need my data to be fixed first. Well, now we don't even need data fixed to fix data. It's kind of it's my non-technical mind thinking there. But on the
Yeah.
other hand, what's important is by you orchestrating what can be done with the data and with real time, you're putting them in a position that they're much better and more ready to make the additional core conversions that they were stalling on because of this. And from what you're saying to me, multiple times, they don't need a core of engineers from front to back all the way across the organization. You bring tools to the table that makes it so you need less people, but you also bring a partnership and a collaborative spirit that says, we already work with organizations like yours. We've gone down the wrong routes at times. We've gone down the right routes. We can bring case studies to the table that can show you the return on investment. This is a big deal in the industry because we need the conversions to be fast. We need it to be seamless. We need it to be thorough. We can't do half jobs, but we also have to make it so it's the building block upon which something bigger is done. When somebody engages with you, how long, and I'm not going to put you in a corner because it really depends more on the client than on you. How long does it take with a partner that says, I want to go about it the way you want to go about it? We're on the same page. How long does it usually take to actually convert their systems and their processes to what lenses can provide?
Okay. I mean, maybe we're an exception here, but generally we're talking about days of effort to get some value because I think what we find with customers is they've been trying to modernize these systems without tools for some time. And now that backlog of these systems that need to be modernized is just getting bigger, right? In some cases, I was speaking with a large financial services, US-based bank, and they said even without AI, they had 400 different projects in the backlog that they just couldn't process quickly enough. And again, that's the challenges that we've talked about, the lack of skills and the lack of access that these teams have to data. So already by just giving them something that accelerates, it takes the pain away. And I'm really talking about days in general of value to accelerate the development of these services and to get value from lenses. But what I find then is, and especially now in the world of AI and agents, is that our customers and the market in general is so hungry to partner with vendors. We're entering really uncharted territory. And what will make customers successful and businesses successful is having close partnerships with businesses and navigating this kind of uncharted world. And more, I have customers coming to us and saying, especially around AI, saying, hey, can you help us here? We have this strategy or we have these initiatives. We'd like to get validation of how you could help us and get insights of how you've helped other customers. And I've been in the industry around 20 years. I've never sensed more of that than I have in the last 20 years, in the last 6 months, sorry, in particular.
Yeah, what's interesting too, and we see it with almost every type of implementation tool, every type of collaboration, is while there's great intention, sometimes we can't get out of our own ways. So what barriers, what hurdles get in the way upon trying to get good implementation success? Because what you bring to the table is pretty powerful. But that doesn't mean that every engagement plays the way you want it to, or that there's challenges financial institutions have within their own organizations actually being a good partner on their side. Not intentional, but it happens. What do you see as being the biggest challenge financial institutions have in actually moving forward with what you can provide?
I think regulation is definitely one of them, because there's this instant fear of, okay, if you're going to give teams access to data, especially real-time data, it's a very, very difficult form of data to master. And when I say master, it means harness, but it also means govern. And you can probably use the analogy of, data in a lake that's sitting idly. You can see it and control it. But then real-time data is like a stream. Sometimes we literally call it a data stream. It's a torrent of information. How do you control a torrent of information from a governance and regulatory perspective? Not only that data lives in multiple geos. Most of the listeners here working within financial services generally have global operations, whether that's your customers, your employees, your partners and suppliers. So your data is going to live in different geos and jurisdictions. Not only that, this real-time data is kind of almost literally flowing across different borders. That becomes a huge concern, and it's frightening for businesses. Do I want to give my teams access to data that they shouldn't be seeing? And again, this is where we partner with our customers, and our solution allows you to have not only this global visibility, it doesn't force anyone to change the data or move the data out of a geo, but it provides all the security and the governance and the data masking, if necessary, of anything that's sensitive. So I would definitely say compliance and security is a big barrier and frightening for organizations. Again, this is where
And not because it's illegal, but the perception of, are we going to be,
absolutely.
it's legacy thinking being applied towards modern technology and capabilities. And we had, as an industry, had to go through that when we looked at cloud governance, that, geez, do I really want my data someplace
Wow.
else? And the reality is, once people realized, oh, geez, the cloud is more secure than my current system, then it's okay. But to your point, it's not that what you're doing is illegal or breaks any kind of regulations. It's the perception as to how do I cover my tracks. But again, the good news is you have a wealth of knowledge within your organization, but your clients also have had to have that same hurdle jumped over. And you can use them as an example as to how an organization can rethink what's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with AI, this is where it goes to another level, is that, now there's pressure on these businesses to give AI access to data. So if you don't trust your humans with this data, are you going to trust your AI? And this is where first thing is trust. What I would say to every customer that really wants to jump on the AI and agentic train is, it's not gonna. You've got to solve your fundamental problems. You've got to trust your humans with data first, and that is possible, as you just said, right? The same thing with moving to the cloud. The fear around that, with good tooling and partnering with vendors, that is possible. And then once you trust your humans, then you can start trusting your agents. What you don't want to do is trust your agents to access data when the humans can't, or you don't trust your humans, right? And you don't have the guardrails around the human access.
It's interesting. You've written in Forbes about a concern that many bank leaders have around vendor lock-in, essentially betting that their future is going to be left with one technology company. Why is this particularly dangerous in financial services, and how should banks rethink about protecting themselves?
Yeah, I think this is now one of the biggest concerns I'm hearing from leaders. I think it's something that's been passed down from investors and the board, the C-suite, and now to the leaders, technology leaders that I speak to. For the past 20 years, I would say that there was convenience with working with one vendor. It gave you economies of scale, speed, comfort. You built great relationships with them. But now, so the benefit was speed, especially when it came to adopting cloud, for example. So we'd often hear of all in with a particular cloud vendor. Regulation has slightly intervened here and said, actually, you know what? Maybe you shouldn't have all your eggs in one basket. You need to hedge a little bit your risk. I think now that's at another level.
Yeah.
Whereas there's kind of factors, kind of commercial factors and market factors, but also geopolitical factors, where there is a concern that being dependent on a very small number of vendors is now a risk. Again, because we're talking about banks, it's not just the organization itself, it's actually the flow of money and the economy of, or even in some cases, the world economy. So what's good is, as I said, the convenience of working with just one vendor just meant that you have to work, train your team on one technology and so on. Now what we're seeing is there's a risk with that, but also there's a competitive advantage by working with multiple vendors.
Yep.
And I'll give a few examples. one of the big things that we're seeing in the industry is the need of data sharing. Now, data sharing, we've kind of touched on it. Some of these services that we talked about means moving data as a real-time data stream from one part of your business to another, right? From your payments team to your finance team, or from to your marketing team. Now we're seeing the need of sharing data external to your business, either to your suppliers or in some cases, your competitors or third parties in general. I'll give an example. A very large US customer, banking customer, shares data with a big cloud provider, ServiceNow. The reason for that is cybersecurity. They use this particular ServiceNow ticketing system. When a ticket is raised, the internal security team of the bank is in-house. So there needs to be sharing of real-time data between the supplier and the bank itself. And we're talking about seconds to respond in the case of a security, responding to a security requirement. So that's the case of a partner. When it comes to fraud, there's a need of sharing data across the different banks. Everyone has to gain by sharing fraud and attack vectors, even to their competition. Everyone has to gain. And again, sometimes you just have seconds to share that information for another organization to respond. But perhaps the biggest opportunity is around commercialization of data. So data that's in a batch or available in a lake, so it's kind of aged a little bit, has finite value. If you can convert and have that data as a stream in real time, it has exponentially more value. And that value can be sold. And I think there's an opportunity for every business to become effectively a data business. Data has to be treated as a product. And just like any product, you need a supply chain. You need the ability to distribute that data across your business and across your other businesses. If you've got real-time data, but you can't share that and send it out of your organization as a real-time data stream, you're losing an advantage to commercialize that. And that buyer of the data might say, well, hold on, you add this data as a real-time data stream, and then you're sending it to me by batch. That's not the product I want. I want this data as a real-time data stream. If we think about how LLMs are trained, I think something like 10% of the world's data is publicly available, what these LLMs are trained on, Wikipedia, literature, and so on. 90% of the data is behind a firewall. It's commercial. Right. It's private data. And if we want to have really leverage the AI revolution, these LLM providers are going to have to train their data on private data, medical research, fraud patterns, and so on. And that's going to come from private enterprise. So the question is, how do these businesses share this data and sell it commercially as a real-time data stream? And this is also where Lenses helps. We've just released what we call a replicator that allows you to move and share your data, both internal to your business and external to your business in real time.
You know, we've touched around AI, and when you look at the future AI, for me, it's extraordinarily exciting when you think about agentic AI and what the potential can be with AI agents. You know, these systems and this autonomous thought pattern can make decisions and take actions on behalf of a consumer, not knowing what the consumer's actually going to accept or what's going to be possible from a banking world where there's so much emphasis on risk avoidance as opposed to managing risk. But how does real-time data change what's possible with AI in banking, especially as we look towards what the future can really become?
Yeah, I mean, real-time data opens up whole new possibilities. I think it's a common theme, but in our discussion, but cybersecurity is the sort of thing where the types of attacks are beyond the capability of a human to respond in time. So these security agents are required that need access to real-time data in order to detect and respond to threats. That's an example of just that it's absolute table stakes that these security agents need access to a real-time data stream. Fraud would be another example. I think I touched also on kind of call centers, it comes up increasingly in the conversations I have with customers, the opportunity to reduce costs of call centers. Again, these call center operators and the AI assistant needs, they need huge amounts of real-time data. I think you mentioned something interesting that was, do we put these agents in front of customers directly? I think the industry is kind of recalibrating a little bit on what they can expect from agents, especially within highly regulated industries. They are difficult to master. We shouldn't think that these agents are easy to build, but they may be easy to build. But it's building is one thing, but that actually putting them in front of your customers is another, where you can trust them. The safest thing, what I'm seeing with customers, is where there's AI in the loop. It's a human process rather than human in the loop. It's AI in the loop. It's a human process where AI is assisting the user on
Exactly.
that journey,
Yep.
right? And maybe if I lean on call center as an example, we have a particular customer doing this where it's still a human call center operator, but there's AI systems that are analyzing the voice of the customer in real time. And that voice analysis is doing sentiment analysis. Is the customer frustrated or not? Now, if you've offshored or outsourced your call center, it could be that team is in a culture in a different culture, right, or adopted a different culture, and they wouldn't understand the intonations and based on the voice whether the customer is frustrated or not. And here's an example where on the call center screen, it can measure and state whether it feels that the customer is frustrated. And if they're frustrated, you might route them to a different operator or offer them a discount or an apology or of some form. That sort of system has to happen in real time. It's no point telling the call center operator 5 minutes later that they were frustrated after they've already hung up.
Well, it's interesting because when you look at agentic AI, the way I see it actually being implemented, at least initially, is you can give me recommendations, but just like is being done on text right now with a lot of other industries, you can always ask me to authenticate that you want to go forward with what I've recommended. If you're saying, I found this and you may be interested in it, but I give you the final say, that it very intentionally says you're controlling your data and your information. I'm simply here as a really powerful assistant that says, I found something you may be interested in. That also opens the door that if I'm wrong, you can say, no, I'm good. And that makes it much more comfortable. Now, I'm not too sure, the financial institution industry is just built on no risk. And so they're afraid of that wrong answer out there when really we're giving everybody the authority, every other industry, every other connection, the authority to make a mistake if you do more right than wrong. The value is built that way. And I think that's really where the power is. And again, to the very foundation of our discussion, you can't do that without real-time data. It doesn't do me any good if you're telling me what has already happened to me. I get that already. I want to know what you think might happen to me ahead of time. I want the GPS that says, by the way, there's a Starbucks or a retail store you like visiting 15 miles up the road, and tell me if you're going to be, since you're continuing down this path, you may want to stop by. I may be completely wrong. I may not want to stop there, but I'm not going to accuse you of being wrong. You're giving me good information. It's interesting because you've mentioned a couple of times the fact that, most financial institutions just don't have the engineers and developers necessary to really use real-time data and AI in the current state of affairs. For banks that are not traditionally seen as technology companies, how will they restructure their systems or their back offices to be able to really implement what you can provide at scale and speed?
Yeah, I was going to say that. Yeah, I think one of the just going back to what you were saying there a minute ago is one of the best ways of losing confidence with the AI agents is if it's providing something and it's just not in real time. I mean, I'm just going to say, well, that's worthless to me, and that's how you can lose kind of faith and trust in these agentic projects. I might as well do it myself. So, hence the importance of real time. What we're saying in terms of the back office, where and this is probably one of the biggest kind of uh, disruptors of the industry right now is actually AI within engineering itself. This is where by equipping engineers themselves with AI that makes their work easier, then they're better positioned to modernize more systems. And again, this is where also where Lenses comes in. We're introducing AI into the product itself that's embedded in the workflow of some of these teams and what they're having to do to accelerate them. This, in general, is a kind of almost a low risk because there's always, as you said, there's always a human in the lead as it stands. It can only, if it's right, it's great. If it's not, we move
Yep.
on. So what we're seeing with many of our customers is investing fundamentally in AI, equipping AI to engineering teams for them to accelerate the building of AI systems, right?
Yeah, it's interesting, Guillaume. What you provide is something that every institution needs to have available to them through one provider or another. The challenge many times is not knowing what you don't know and not knowing the risk of doing nothing. How does
Mm,
an organization connect with you to at least have dialogue around what's the potential? We've only scratched the surface. I mean, I'm not a programmer, I'm not a technical person, but the reality is, I know what you provide is something that's needed. But I know that if I was a banker, retail banker at any level, I'd probably say, I not only have to kick the tires, but I got to understand more about the risk and reward around this. How do they get a hold of you or your company to get a better understanding of what the potential is to at least open our eyes? I tell companies all the time, you have so many great solution providers. You've got to pick up the phone, get on email, hit a text, whatever it is, to engage with these companies to understand better about what's out there and what's needed. And then you still have to make the decision who to partner with. I can almost guarantee that it's probably not your normal core provider because most core providers, this is not what they're the best at, even though they're data companies by trade.
mm.
So how does an organization get a hold of you, your company, to understand more about the risks and rewards with this?
Yeah, I mean, the good news is, is that the majority of our customers are within the financial
Yeah.
services industry. We have a lot of experience. We've got more than 10 years in this real-time space, having worked with some of the largest Fortune 500 companies. And we know that this is kind of a entering a new paradigm. It's a big leap. So my team and the team are very well trained and versed on both educating our customers and our prospects as they reach out to us.
Yeah.
And we've got experts that don't just do, they're not just on a single project, but they help our customers on a whole transformation. And that includes all the things around the side around cultural changes that might need to be implemented within your business. And of course, some of the different use cases that we can share with that we do with other customers. So yeah, I mean, the easiest way is to go on our website, drop us a message, and then a team will respond back.
Interesting also, Guillaume. As we look to what happens in this industry, I've been in this industry my whole career, and I think it's a challenge because to get us unstuck, to get us to actually do something, often is hard. But it takes that first step. Just with any kind of transformation, personal or professional, what would be your recommendation to a financial services executive to that first step? What should they do today to become more resilient? We usually talk about resilience in the form of fraud, risk, and insecurity. But the reality is resilience now means being agile enough, being flexible enough, making sure your back office can actually support the future of AI. What does a financial institution executive has to do today? Number one, job one, to really get moving towards a better future.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so much value in teams on the ground, right? If you can equip those teams with tools that makes their job easier and can embrace, rather than seeing real-time data as something daunting or scary, we touched on it also around regulation. Actually, there are easy wins. You can win hearts and minds by giving your teams on the ground great tooling that allows them to embrace that. That instantly triggers a cultural change in your business.
Yeah.
By equipping those teams, you're protecting yourself for the future. You're equipping them to be able to respond quicker as new threats and opportunities arise. And I'm a big believer. I mean, I think it's a culture that we try and instill within our company. We're maybe a very engineering heavy company, but wow, there's some great talent with those engineers. And if you
Yeah.
give them the right tools, they can deliver magic.
Great recommendations, great thoughts, great insight, and almost a lens to the future. I'll use your company's name as a little bit of a connection there. But, for those of you who are listening to podcasts that want to understand more about the power of data, the power of AI, the power of analytics, and the importance of real-time data, be sure to catch some of the other episodes shown here on the screen. And as always, thank you for joining me on Banking Transform.